I feel a little odd filming this right now. It's the last day of January and I have not filmed my wrap up yet because there's one book that I'm still reading from my January TBR and I have this like pipe dream that I'm going to finish it before the end of today. It's not going to happen. And then also I'm filming this in the middle of the day on a weekday because I'm working from home and so that just feels weird too. Hello everyone, it's Caroline. Thank you so much for joining me today as I tell you about my reading hopes and dreams and wishes for the month of February, my February TBR. I have decided that I think in terms of creating and curating my monthly TBRs, I am going to start with the foundation of trying to find one adult, one young adult, and one middle grade. I think I'm going to start by telling you my intentional adult pick, my intentional young adult pick, my intentional middle grade pick, and then we'll get into like extra bonus ones, readathons, fun ones, things like that. Starting off with the adult book that I plan to read, it's In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. This is a adult contemporary romance, I believe. It's about this woman who is happily engaged and then I think she has this dream one night of her life, but she's engaged to a different person and she's like extremely happy, and then she wakes up and lives her life out, and then 5 years later, title 5 years later, she meets this literal man of her dreams, and I'm assuming that's where the conflict starts. I really don't know. This is not a book that I typically would read or pick up on my own, but here's my reasoning. I am going through a Taylor Swift awakening. I promise this connects, just stick with me for a couple of seconds. Recently, with her album Evermore, I don't know how I started listening to it initially. Maybe one of the songs from there came up on like a Spotify shuffle, but I have fallen down an Evermore rabbit hole. I love that album with my whole heart. The storytelling in it is like, I get invested in each song like it is a different story. My investment in those singular tracks are like my investment in books. So anyways, I'm going through this thing, particularly the song Champagne Problems. I can't think about it that much because I just get very overwhelmed. I love that song so much. And my friend Kristen on Instagram, she is a big Taylor Swift fan, like an OG fan. And she is also a fellow reader. And she made this book recommendations post based off of the tracks on Evermore, and this was her recommendation for Champagne Problems, and I just knew like I need that song in book form so badly, and this was the one that she recommended. I'm hoping it has the same like atmosphere and tone and just like heart-wrenching feelings, gives me the same heart-wrenching feelings that that song gives me. The young adult read for this month is going to be The Lovely War, or just Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is, well, okay, I have known about this book for years. I think it was really big right when it came out. I'm not sure how long ago it was published, but it was really well received, and I've seen this, I've known about it, but I just always assumed that this was a typical YA World War II historical fiction, and while I have enjoyed books from that genre, it's just not a genre that I gravitate towards and I want to pick up immediately. But I forget who I was watching. It might have been Katya, I don't know. Someone brought this book up and brought to my attention that this is a historical fiction mixed with like mythology, gods elements, and that sounds so intriguing to me. Gods interacting with mortals, I love that. I love the dynamic between gods and humans, and the fact that it's in the time period of World War I and World War II, I'm very intrigued. That's all I know about it, and that's all I want to know about it, and I'm very interested at how this is going to go. There was a plane flying overhead, or about to fly directly overhead in that last clip, so I'm hoping that it didn't ruin. It's still flying overhead. I'm hoping it doesn't ruin the sound quality that much. For my middle grade pick, I think this is the only middle grade that I'm planning on reading this month, but I am so desperate to get to this. It's one that I fully intended on getting to in 2020, but I just didn't get around to it. But I know, like, I just know that I'm going to love this one, or at least I think I'm going to love this one, and it's King and the Dragonflies by Kayla. This centers around a young boy who, I believe his brother passes away, and he confides in his brother about his sexual identity right before his brother passing away. After his brother dies, the main character, King, believes that he can see his brother in the form of a dragonfly, and I think it takes place in like a bayou setting. And I loved Hurricane Child from Kayla so much because of this haunting sort of tone and this middle grade character that was struggling with grief and identity. I just think that Calendar writes it so well. It seems like all of those similar themes are going to be present in this book as well, so I am so desperate and excited to get to this. Those are my intentional adult, young adult, and middle grade picks. So now let's move on to the rest of my TBR. Let's go ahead and start with readathons. This month is Blackathon, hosted by Jesse over at Bowties and Books, and I will link their announcement video down below. They have poured so much effort and energy into this, and I'm so excited to be participating in this. Even if it is a little unconventional the way that I'm going to be participating in it. Basically, there are a couple of different teams, and the teams are based on genre, and then within each team there are certain prompts based on the genre. And I asked Jesse, and they said that this was okay to like mix and match prompts across different genres or across different teams. They said it was okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. There's a prompt underneath the sci-fi team, and it's to read a book that involves time travel. And for this one, I'm going to be reading Long Division by Kiese Layman. This centers around a main character who finds a book called Long Division, and he discovers that upon reading it that he is a character within this book, or at least he has the same name to a character in this book. The thing is that this book is set in the book within the book. The book Long Division within the book Long Division. This is so confusing. The book that the character discovers is set in 1985, and I think the book itself, the real book Long Division that I will be reading, is set in present day, so the character is able to time travel into the setting of the book. Also, there's a prompt on the sci-fi genre team, I believe, that is something to the effect of a Black main character that traverses like the spiritual realm, and maybe I could use King and the Dragonflies for that. I'm not quite sure that the character goes to a different spirit realm, but I think that there's interactions with his brother's spirit. I'm not quite sure. I may have to, I'll read and see if that fulfills that prompt. And I'm gonna be switching over to the literary fiction, non-fiction team, and there's a prompt to read a book that spans one character's life or a multi-generational book. And for this, I am going to be reading Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson. This has absolutely been on my radar just because Jacqueline Woodson wrote it, and I desperately love Jacqueline Woodson's writing. Multi-generational in the fact that there's multiple timelines, I think, that we're focusing on. And I think that the common thread is that there's this sort of coming of age ceremony that this girl is going through, the main character is going through, and she's wearing this dress, and the dress traces back to her mother. It was originally made for her mother and her mother's coming of age ceremony, but her mother never got the opportunity to wear that dress. So I think it's kind of about, I don't know, loss and grief, and then the mother's timeline, and then the daughter's timeline as well. So with this one, Kayla from Booksandlala is hosting like a year-long Buzzwordathon. So for each month of the year, there's different words that you look for in titles, and I think February is to read a book with a color in it, so Red at the Bone works for that. I'm not gonna lie, these two recent acquisitions are like staring me dead in the face, but I'm already, I think, at like 5 books, which is usually what I average, and these I know are going to be heavier for whatever reason, so I'm just gonna keep these both on the back burner. And the last book that I plan on reading in the month of February is this small but mighty one, On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder. Timothy Snyder is a historian that specializes in like Central and Eastern European history, particularly the time period surrounding the Holocaust specifically. And in this book, I can show you, it breaks it down into 20 lessons on tyrannical reigns, how they get started, how they get boosted, and then ultimately how we as people living on the other side of history where tyrannical reigns took place, what we can do to recognize the signs of tyranny and the telltale signs, and then what we can do to prevent it. After the events that took place in early January at the Capitol with the insurrection and the domestic terrorism, this was a book that I saw come up a lot, and it just seems so important now, especially to guard ourselves with knowledge and information. And this seems like a book that is accessible, not only in its size, but also in just like the way that it's broken down. That's it. Those are my reading plans for the month of February. Now I'm gonna go try to finish this by the end of the day. This is how far I am into it. Do you believe in me? As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm so glad that you're here. Let me know, really, if you've read any of these books. I'm so hyped for all of them, but there's also some of them that I'm definitely scared to read. I hope that you are having a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.